And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post Podcast, where the NBA draft is only 2.5 days away. The offseason is in full swing. The rumors are flying. But as you know, the NBA Finals are the whole reason we do this. The championship is the whole reason we do this. And somehow, mostly because of the man I'm about to introduce, I have finagled a tradition where the coach of the championship winning team comes on this stupid podcast and tells stories from their championship winning season. Now a 4-time champion as a head coach, a 5-time champion as a player. It's getting ridiculous. The head coach of the Golden State Warriors, fresh from the parade, Steve Kerr, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on again, Zach.
Well, I mean, look. Just don't think the team won. That's all. You're at this point. You're just mandated to do it.
It's a tradition unlike any other.
Yeah, that's what they say about the That's the Masters, right?
No, that's your podcast with the championship winning coach.
Yes, Coach. Before we get to the important stuff, it has come to my attention. I have photographic evidence of this. That after the parade, there was some sort of feast, party, something, and as part of the buffet, there was a plate of cannolis decorated in blue and gold, and the sign next to them, normally they describe what food it is and all this stuff. It just said, "Holy cannoli." Is this true?
I did not see it, so I can't confirm it nor deny it. But I saw a million signs along the parade route that just said, "Holy cannoli." So Klay always manages to leave his influence for sure.
We have to be careful with this because it's such a precious moment. We can't overdo it. We can't overuse the phrase now. It can't become too. It was a perfect moment in time, and I think we need to leave it a little bit more alone. I don't want it to become corrupted.
The holy cannoli phrase?
Yes, the holy cannoli.
I think it belongs to Klay. I don't think anybody else can really just throw it out there. I think we got to just leave it to him.
It's been a long. I could tell seeing you after the game in several different venues that this was a celebratory. This was not a relief championship. This was a pure joy championship. What you guys have been through in the last 3 years as a basketball team, the injuries, the departures, we don't have to relive that. But I wanted to start with, in all of that time, maybe it was the news that Klay had sustained a second catastrophic injury right when it appeared he was going to come back. Maybe it was a low point like the 53-point loss to the Raptors in Tampa. Were there moments where you looked around and thought, we'll be a good team again, but maybe the days of May, June, maybe that's just over for us, and I wonder what that means for me, for Steph? Were there ever moments like that?
Yeah, there were plenty of moments like that, Zach. I mean, we had the worst record in the league 2 years ago, and last year we missed the playoffs altogether. I think in the back of our minds, we always thought, all right, when Klay comes back, we'll have a chance. But I don't know that any of us really knew what that meant. I have said to you before, our finish to last year, 15-5, where we looked and felt like ourselves again, gave us a lot of hope going into this year. And, knowing Klay was going to come back and having had Wiggins for, a little bit over a year. And, it felt coming into this year like we could do something special. But honestly, I don't think any of us knew whether we could win the whole thing or not.
I wonder about Klay. 940-something days, 2 injuries, a pandemic which separated him from the team to some degree. I mean, it's hard for me to remember what the rules were in April and May and June of 2020. I wonder if you have sort of any memories of that time, particularly low moments for him, a Zoom during the pandemic where, not only is he going through these injuries, but everyone's trying to figure out what life looks like. A setback of some kind, or a practice where he just didn't have it the way he thought he was going to have it. I don't know if you have any memories of like that, because I feel like we're rushing past what he has overcome. An ACL, right, which in your day was career-threatening, no longer. and an Achilles, which although KD has recovered from it and Klay has recovered from it, is still about as catastrophic an injury as a basketball player can suffer. I wonder if you have any sort of memories of that journey for him.
Yeah, an awful lot. One that jumps out is maybe about a month or so before he made his comeback. So I'm guessing mid-December. We had a home game, and he's been toiling away for a couple of years now. And after the game, he went out onto the court and sat on the bench as the stands emptied out at Chase. And I had a couple people come to me and say, Coach, you need to go check on Klay. He's out sitting on our bench and he's despondent right now. And so I went out there and he was basically crying on the bench by himself. And Steph and Draymond both came out there. And I think everything was just too much for Klay at that point. He was still kind of wondering, like, is this ever going to happen for me? And everything that he had been through seemed to kind of come to a boiling point for him emotionally. And he just started crying. And, there were people still filing out of the arena and like the other team, comes out to see their families and stuff. So there were a lot of people around and people were kind of looking over, but, he just had his head in his hands. And he was, the irony is he was only a few weeks away from actually coming back, but it was just such a haul that I think it just overwhelmed him.
How was he looking at that point behind closed doors, and what were your expectations for him in the first month or two of his, or even flash forward to May and June? What if you thought ahead like that? What did you expect, and what was he looking like?
Well, he was looking fine, but it was, coming back from an Achilles is such a painstaking process, and it's just step by step, literally. And so our training staff, just put him through all these different exercises and would take him from one step to the next, but it was really, really slow. So, he'd start doing some 5-on-0 stuff where we're, going through our offense. He'd be running, straight ahead, some sprints. Maybe a week later, he'd start to kind of do some figure eight stuff and start to cut. But it was such a slow process that we didn't really get to see much of him until we had a game that was canceled in Denver, or postponed because of COVID. I think a bunch of the Nuggets players had COVID, and so that we were in Denver and the game got postponed, and we had a scrimmage instead at the Pepsi Center, and Klay played in that scrimmage for the first time, and that was a big moment for him and for us, and it was kind of cool too. We're there in this empty arena, the game's been canceled, and it was almost like, hey, it's a perfect night for Klay to come back and for us to get some work in and for him to feel part of things again. And I thought that was a big night for him. And he came back, less than a week later, I think.
Are people in that scrimmage guarding Klay like a normal player, or are they like afraid to touch him and get physical? And was there ever a moment in those practices early on where he took a stumble or a fall or tried to jump and dunk it, and when everyone held their breath a little bit?
He never took a fall. Like nothing ever happened that was scary. I think at first, players were a little bit reluctant to guard him too hard. They didn't want to be physical with him. And I think once they saw him for a few days and he looked fine, everyone realized, okay, this is no big deal. Like Klay can play again. And so the scrimmage process was good. We had a lot of them. And as he got more and more comfortable and got closer to playing in a real game, the rest of our guys got more comfortable with him.
There was, you described this championship as Stephen Curry's crowning achievement so far. And there's a long way to go for his career, man. The man is not slowing down. And he has kind of come out with this, what are they going to say now phrase, what you're going to say now. There's T-shirts of it. I think in one of your many media things you've done, you talked about, a lot of the guys wanted to win this for Steph. And that phrasing kind of struck me because it's like Steph Curry's an all-time great player, like at worst top 15, top 16 coming in to this finals, let alone now. He hasn't won a finals MVP and Durant and this, it all struck me as nonsense. And my assumption was the team just sort of laughed at it, like this dumb media creating storylines. But to hear it phrased like win it for Steph, it almost seemed like that noise seeped in a little bit and you guys actually did hear it and actually, whether you thought it was valid or not, wanted to shut it off. Is that true?
Oh, it's definitely true. And one thing I've learned, Zach, is that the guys today hear and read everything. So, whether it's Draymond or Klay or Steph, any perceived slight that they feel, they use as motivation, and they see all that stuff. And there's so much chatter, there's just so much that's out there. I mean, you got the whole league, players all over the league are tweeting back and forth at each other. You got, so many different media personalities, and everybody's like throwing shots, lobbing shots across the country at each other. It really is bizarre. It's a totally different world, from the one I played in. And so because of that, it's a different atmosphere, and a lot of these narratives really take hold. And I think for Steph, he's heard it over the years that, he's never won finals MVP, and the last two titles were all about, KD and the first one, Andre got MVP. But as the great players are always looking for what's next, and they're looking for another challenge, and they're looking for anything to motivate themselves. And I think Steph used that as motivation this year for sure.
What are your memories of the 43 points in Game 4? Because that was one of the great games I've ever been to, considering the stakes, considering the defense you were facing. And I thought they largely played him pretty well in that game. I mean, these are crazy in a phone booth shots he's hitting. Did you have a moment with him after the game you remember? Was there a shot that he hit? I mean, I remember in Oklahoma City in 2016 when Klay was going crazy, you had a moment with a fan just sort of laughing at like, this guy's ridiculous. Did you have a moment like that from Game 4 or something you'll remember from that game?
I think just in the second half, he had, at least 2, maybe 3 shots coming left, beyond, well beyond the top of the key, 7 feet beyond the 3-point line, with guys all over him. And I don't even know how he saw the rim. And he made 2 in a row, I think mid fourth quarter, that were just ridiculous shots. Like nobody on earth can make those shots. And obviously he carried us that whole night, but those 2 shots were just stunning. And I think those were backbreakers too. You could just see, you could feel the crowd, sort of losing hope as he was making all those shots.
Did you have a moment with him after the series was over that you can share a conversation? I mean, you guys have now been together for 8 years. You have a history that predates that, which we will talk about later. I don't know if there's a moment with him or his family, a conversation that you could share, just sort of you guys put it all in perspective, or was it just we're going to have some drinks and party and that's it?
Well, we shared some words on the stage, as all the players and family members were on the stage, and I just shared with him how much, he has meant to me. And basically, what I told him was that as great as everybody has been, with the Warriors, from ownership to front office to, coaching staff to great players coming through here, all-stars, that this was, this has all been built on him, like most dynasties. I mean, the Spurs were basically built, on Tim Duncan, and, the Lakers were built on Magic Johnson. The Celtics were built on Larry Bird. Bulls on Michael Jordan, taking nothing away from all the great players and coaches and GMs and ownership people that contribute to all this. But there's usually one transcendent star that is the reason for these, whatever you want to call them, dynasties or runs or whatever. And that's what I shared with him, that he's basically the reason that this has all happened.
Now he's obviously, there are basketball reasons for that and personality reasons for that. Yeah. The personality reasons have been ultra competitive, ultra devoted to his conditioning, a humility a willingness to share the spotlight in the game with other players and play a style that you guys play. I wonder if there's just some story or something about him that can put that humility part, because Tim Duncan had that too. You've called him short Tim Duncan. Obviously, we can point to his willingness to have Durant come in. That's so far in the past now, and it's such a singular circumstance. I don't know if there is something that you can kind of bring that, personalize it a little bit, because it's easy to say, well, the guy's so humble, he stays humble. I just wonder if there's something where we can flesh that out a little bit.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, because it's literally every single day where you feel that humility, just the way he carries himself and the way he celebrates others' success. You see him on the sidelines when he's not in the game, when somebody gets hot, and he just goes crazy. And the other players feel his joy for them and their success. And I think that's a big part of it. For me, what jumps out right away is, the first round against Denver. He was coming off that injury, and he was limited to, I think, 20 minutes the first game. So we brought him off the bench, and after the first game, the minutes are going up. After the second game, he's up, he's going to be up near 30. And at that point, it's like, I go to him, I'm like, Steph, like, if you want to start, like, you're Steph Curry, you get to start if you want. And he's just, he's just matter of fact. He's like, we're playing great. Jordan's in a great groove. We're up 2-0. Let's keep going. Let's keep going with this. And he was perfectly content coming off the bench. We completely joked about it for the next couple of days. I remember the starting lineups, I think, as the starters were being called out in either game 2 or game 3, he was standing next to me, and I turned to him and he said, Steph, if you work hard enough, someday you too could start an NBA playoff game. And he laughed. And then, the next several days, as he's practicing and working, he's like, look at me, coach, look how hard I'm working. I deserve this. I know I can do this. And so that's Steph, like what might be a serious issue with other players, like it turns into a complete joke for him, where it's like, we're laughing about it because bottom line is he knows we're winning. Jordan Poole's playing great. The rotation makes sense, and we're up 3-0, whatever it is, like, no problem. Let's just do it.
Someone actually asked me, I wish I could remember what show I was on. The host asked me, should they make this permanent? It's rolling so well. Should they just bring Steph off the bench? I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a real thing. But it was actually working that well against the Nuggets.
It was working great, and I think Mike Malone even said something during the series. He said Steph Curry's the greatest sixth man in the history of the NBA. And I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, oh my God, I mean, this is, can you imagine? I turned to my staff. I'm like, can you imagine, you're sitting there down on the other bench, and, 6 minutes into the game, you see Steph checking in at the scorer's table. Like, that's kind of terrifying, and like I said, Jordan Poole, it was his first playoff run, and he's rolling. And he got off to this great start, and Steph recognized that. And again, that's part of his humility. Like, he saw it, and he's like, yeah, let's let Jordan keep going.
You played with Tim Duncan. You played against, Hakeem Olajuwon. You played with Michael Jordan. You've coached against LeBron, coached for and against Durant, Kobe, all of it. Shaq. Did you overlap with Kareem at all?
Yeah, just I think 1 year, my rookie year.
So you've lived all of these guys, most of them that are in this discussion. Do you consume ever as sort of? Do you ever step back and consume the game like we do in the media, ranking players? Is he in the top 10 all time? Is he top 12 all time? Is Steph above this guy? Steph and Kobe is going to be a debate now. Do people inside the game think that's silly, or as someone who's lived all that history, do you actually find yourself thinking about it sometimes?
I don't. I don't ever think about like who ranks where, because it's sort of a futile effort anyway. But I do marvel just because I've been so blessed to witness so much of NBA history, playing with so many great players, against them. I do marvel at Steph and the impact that he's made in terms of changing the game, changing the way it's played, changing the way people think of the point guard position. Like he's one of the great influencers in the history of the league, and that's hard to do. Most people don't ever do that.
Has it been interesting to you to watch guys who are ball handlers with Steph-like range come into the NBA, but they don't move off the ball the way Steph does? We can talk about Trae Young or whatever. I can name the names. Trae Young, even Dame doesn't move off the ball like Steph does. We just haven't seen a guy who can handle the ball at a high level and run around like Ray Allen at a high level, and even in more intricate, unpredictable patterns and calculated patterns than Ray Allen ran. Has it been interesting to watch those guys come into the league and none of them really try to emulate what Steph does?
I think that is the case. I think you're right. Very few, if any, players are a threat on and off the ball like Steph is. If I had to guess why, it's because Steph was not a point guard in college. He played off the ball at Davidson. And so he really grew up as a player running off screens. And his dad was a guy who ran off screens and played off the ball. So his whole childhood, he's a guy who's playing off the ball, running off screens. But in the meantime, he's working on his ball handling and becoming this wizard with the ball, so that once he became so potent in high ball screens, he already had this whole foundation of working off the ball. And probably most players who grow up, handling the ball and the guys you're talking about, the young generation of stars in the league, most of them don't have that background that Steph has of playing, for so long off the ball.
What was the 24 hours like after Game 4 when you quote unquote benched Draymond Green during the fourth quarter when he would normally have been playing, and went without him for a 4 or 5 minute period where he would have normally have been in the game? Obviously, he is a strong personality, a personality type you have valued for all the strength that we're talking about. But that a lot of people were worried that, this is going to blow up. I sat there and thought these guys have so much shared history that I just don't see this as a problem. But I do wonder, how do you handle those next 24 hours? Do you meet with him right after the game? Do you guys go out for a drink afterwards? Do you just text and say, we'll talk the next morning? How does that happen? How does that unfold?
Really nothing for a couple of days. I mean, we won the game. Obviously, if we had lost the game, maybe it's different. Maybe I approach him, right away, but we won the game. So everybody's happy. We spend the night, we fly home the next day, and we have the day off. So it wasn't until, the following day at practice that we actually had a chance to talk, and he totally understood. We got on a run after we took him out, and Looney was playing great, and I forget what the run was, but something like 12-4 or 14-4, something like that, and like most coaches, you don't want to change the rotation when the combination when things are going well. So really, we ended up talking a little bit, and it was more strategic. We watched the offensive clips together of the game, and we just tried to locate, what Boston was doing and how he could, find ways to attack them better, and what positions he could be in. But we have so much history together. We've won titles, lost titles, gotten into countless arguments, near fights, but we're like family. We're so tight that we're just going to have moments, and we always just work through them.
Do you listen to the podcast, the Draymond Green Show? He wants people to mention it by name, the Draymond Green Show. It's a very good podcast. Do you ever listen to it?
No, I do not, because I listen to Draymond every single day. So,
Gary Payton II is just an unbelievable story. He told Malika Andrews during the finals that he actually inquired about working in the video room for you guys. Do you remember that happening? Like, did that get to your level? I mean, is that a serious thing, or is that's just a crazy? That's like 4 months ago or something.
Yeah, I didn't know that. We are always looking for video guys who can play, so you get the extra bodies when the young guys who aren't playing many minutes in the games have to scrimmage. So, everybody wants video guys who can play, but that would be pretty extreme to have, Gary Payton coming out of your video room and then dominating those scrimmages. So I didn't know that was a real thing until I heard that story.
When he breaks his elbow in, what was that, game 2 against the Grizzlies?
2. Yeah.
And it's immediately clear it's a serious injury. What's the first time you see him? It was in the first half, I think. Do you see him at halftime? What's after the game like? Is it morose? Was there immediately hope that maybe if we got far enough, he could come back? And beyond that, this is a guy who, as you know, has fought for every inch, every dollar, every minute. What do you say to someone like that when their season might be over?
Yeah, I mean, I just remember going into the locker room afterwards. We lost game 2 in Memphis, and so everybody was bummed already. And I remember, going in, and he had his arm in a sling, and I just, gave him a hug and asked him what the prognosis was. And Gary's a really upbeat guy, and he said, "Hey, I'll be back. I'm going to be back during the playoffs." And I was angry, number one, because I thought it was a dirty play, but I was really worried too, because, we were starting him to guard Ja. And I thought, all right, even if we can get past this series, now we got Chris Paul, coming up, Luka Doncic. I mean, we needed Gary. And so fortunately we were able to, get by Memphis and Dallas. And then I thought that the Boston series actually changed in game 2 when Gary was available. He wasn't quite ready for game 1. He suited up, but we were only going to put him in for like a late defensive stop or something.
And that was because the elbow wasn't quite ready to shoot jumpers yet. Is that what it was?
He had scrimmaged the day before game 1 and couldn't shoot a 3. He could only, and I asked him, I said, "Can you shoot a 3?" He goes, "No, but I could step in and take a dribble and take an 18-footer. I said, "Don't tell our analytics people that. There's no way you're going to get into the game." But no, he wasn't quite ready, and I didn't feel comfortable playing him yet. And then we had 2 days off in between games 1 and 2, and those extra few days helped him. And by the time he was ready for game 2, I felt way better about things, because obviously to beat Boston, you've got to guard, Tatum and Brown and Marcus Smart, and Gary's an elite defender. So I thought he changed the series when he got healthy.
Man, I've stood next to that dude. He is so short to be an elite defender. It's crazy. He's like, it's like one of my buddies, a normal looking size guy, and he can guard Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Like, sometimes they'll shoot over him and stuff, but I mean, he's incredible. And I wonder when that corner 3 in game 2 went in, that had to be a fun moment for you. Say, okay, he's ready to contribute in this series. He's going to get a major contract now, whether it's from you or some other team. Like, he's going to get paid. I think it's an awesome story.
I'm thrilled for Gary, because he's been working for 6 years since he left Oregon State, to try to find a home. And he is an incredible story. He's an amazing defender. He's shorter than I am. I mean, I think he's probably 6'2", but massive wingspan. And I'm talking elite athleticism. I mean, the lateral speed and quickness, he would have been an incredible free safety in the NFL if he wanted to. I mean, he just covers so much ground. And what makes him so good on the ball is that you can't get around him. You try to get around him, you get one dribble past him and you think you got him. And the second dribble, he's taking it from you. Because he's so quick and he's got those long arms and strong hands. And he poked, I think, 4 or 5 steals away from Boston over the course of those last 5 games when they thought they had him, and he just beat them to the spot and stole the ball. He's just incredible.
When did you decide you were going to put Andre Iguodala in for the last minute of Game 6?
We were standing next to each other near the end, and there's about 2 minutes left, minute and a half left, and I said, I should probably leave these guys out here, don't you think? Just so to let them soak it in. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I think that's a good idea. He goes, can I go in? And I go, that's a great idea. And I said, go get Wiggs. And I figured, we'd get the four, mainstays out there, Steph, Klay, Draymond, and Andre. And then Wiggs gets to come to the bench and get this embrace from his teammates, an ovation from the Warriors fans who were there. And then to see our four guys, on the floor. And I saw Andre go and literally take the game ball from somebody on the Celtics, walk over to Steph and hand it to Steph. It was a pretty cool moment.
You told me something for a feature I wrote on Wiggins about why you're glad you're not the GM of the team, because you would have thrown yourself in front of the tracks of salary dumping Andre Iguodala to the Memphis Grizzlies, which paved the way for D'Angelo Russell, which paved the way for Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. I wonder if you can share a little of that and a little of sort of why that is, because Andre is a prickly personality. Everybody knows he's a basketball genius, but why that is, other than he's been around a lot and he's a smart guy and you bounce ideas off him and all that. Well,
just everything that he's done for the franchise, and that's the hardest thing about professional sports. You grow close with somebody, and then there are times where you just have to make trades, you have to move people, and what he had done for the franchise, and in turn what he had done for me, as a young coach. I mean, literally my first year coaching, I asked him to come off the bench. He's never come off the bench in his career, and he did it, and did it beautifully, and it really solidified our bench.
And he wasn't psyched about it, Coach.
No,
right?
He wasn't happy the first month, but I think the Arizona connection, the fact that we both played for Lute Olson, was really helpful. We tend to see the game the same way, and so he trusted me, even though he didn't like it. And then once he got comfortable with it, he really embraced it. The other thing I feel strongly about with Andre is that, our team has a certain craziness to it. The Steph and Klay shot selection at times is just insane. And Andre is the guy over the years who has just sort of tempered everything. And in his prime, the first, 4 years when he was here, when he was, playing all the big minutes in playoff games, he was the guy who settled us down and made sense of the game. And so we shared a connection in terms of, what needed to happen for us to win and for our team to settle down. And he was the guy to get that done.
I'll give you a funny Andre story from during the finals. I don't know who I was talking to. I wish I could remember. It was a front office guy on another team. We were talking about Andre Iguodala. And as I want to do when talking about Andre Iguodala, I bring up the fact that he is the greatest I've ever seen at the swipe down steal, that it's completely uncanny. And this guy said, it's so funny you say that, because we spliced together like a 5 to 10 minute edit of Andre Iguodala swipe down steals, hoping to send it to our young guys to teach them how to do this. Is there some common thread in all of these swipe downs that explains why Andre Iguodala is so good at this? And his most high profile ones came in that down the stretch of Game 6 against Oklahoma City in 2016. And they watched the 5 or 10 minute edit, and the team officials were like, no, he's just awesome at it. There's nothing to teach anybody. He's just too good at it.
Yeah, it's a combination of wingspan, athleticism, and a brain, a guy who just sees and feels the game. So it's pretty much impossible to teach that.
After the latest mass shooting in Texas, you gave an impassioned plea for action, a plea that was both impassioned and somehow very precise in its language and at the target of its criticism, of your criticism, which is a hard thing to be at once, that impassioned and that precise. What was the next 48 hours like for you? Because I think that became a touchstone in a way that you probably didn't even expect, because as you have said, this is sadly not the first time that you have given comments like this. But this one was different. What was it like from your perspective?
Well, it was incredibly emotional. And I heard from a lot of people, a lot of really influential people, and people in government, people, in the tech world, corporate people reaching out saying, what can I do? What can I do to help? And so it was in a lot of ways, it was gratifying to know that so many people wanted to do something that shared my frustrations. But it was also just really emotional, just because, having lost my dad to gun violence, I just, I knew how just awful this was going to be for so many people in Uvalde, so many family members and friends and young people, and all these lives lost. And so just, it's depressing and emotional all at once. But it was nice to know how many people think the same way that I do, and want so desperately for our government to follow through on some real meaningful action.
You said something at the end of those remarks about how we can't just go play the game and say, go Dubs, go Mavs. And as I was preparing for this podcast and fishing around for good questions to ask you and thinking about Steph's legacy, and it struck me like that's exactly what we're doing. Not you, but that's exactly what I'm doing in preparing for this podcast. That's exactly what the sports world is doing and debating Steph's all-time rank and this and that. It's sadly that proved prophetic. And I don't even have a question as much as when I start thinking about things like this, the problem seems so intractable and huge that I feel helpless. Like all of us who feel a certain way would almost like have to quit our jobs and put our life on hold. Like clearly the money is not enough. The donations are not enough. The occasional remarks are not enough. And it just, you saying go Dubs, go Mavs, it just hit me as I was preparing. Like I'm doing that exact thing, and I just it's a helpless, frankly sad feeling. And I wonder if you think back to that part of your remark and say, oh yeah, we just won the championship, we're partying, and have we left it in the rear view? Is that something you feel almost?
No, not at all. I think it's important that we pay attention to everything, and I think I was speaking specifically about the fact that we were going to do a moment of silence. And I'm not kidding. We've had 15 or so moments of silence during my 8-year coaching career where we mourned the loss of, a huge number of human beings due to gun violence. And so the frustration of just doing moments of silence and sending thoughts and prayers and all the stuff that, yes, it's nice and it's respectful, but unfortunately, it doesn't really do anything. It's frustrating. So I do think that there are people all over the country who are fighting the good fight. I heard a great podcast with Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who's probably the most active senator in the government regarding gun safety, and he had great words. He said this is an issue where we just need to keep pushing, and eventually it's going to tip the other way. And one of the analogies he used was, he said, 20 years ago, we didn't have gay marriage. And I know these are totally different subjects, but 20 years ago, President Obama, an unbelievably progressive, incredibly intelligent human being, could not run on a platform of supporting gay marriage for fear of losing, even though inside he probably agreed to it, right, or agreed upon it. So the issue is one where what we have to do is just make incremental progress, and we have to get the conservative senators from states that really support, over the top, gun freedom laws. We got to get those senators to recognize that they can still win their races even if they support some gun safety measures. Once they're able to reconcile that, a little bit like the gay marriage movement, you get enough momentum where people all over the country are finally saying, you know what, it's fine if there's gay marriage. Like, it's actually a good thing. And in terms of gun violence, you get enough conservative people to understand. And when I say conservative, I'm really speaking to people who are really pro, gun rights. Like, you get enough of them to understand that we're not taking away your Second Amendment rights. What we're trying to do is protect our citizens from being slaughtered in schools and malls and churches and everything else. And we can do both. You can still, you still can have the right to bear arms, but, maybe we could cut back on selling weapons of war to 18-year-olds. Like, that would be a good idea. But in the meantime, as Senator Murphy said, we just have to get the ball rolling enough to tip the scales and eventually get there.
Let's do a couple of basketball questions to finish it out. I thought you guys were going to win Game 6 in Boston. I said it on TV. And to anyone who asked me, I think the Celtics are just fatigued and worn out, and the Warriors have kind of figured this series out a little bit. A few little birdies told me that you, I think, had the same sense a little bit and maybe voiced it before the game in something like, we're going to have to take a punch, but once we do, let's really punch back and see how they respond. Because I think in your gut, you felt pretty good about Game 6. Is that fair?
Yeah. And we're lucky to have done this a few times in the past, but it's really tough to change the momentum late in a series. Once the two teams have played against each other, everybody's kind of figured everything out. You kind of know who you're playing and, what your combinations are going to be, all that stuff. But it's tough to change the momentum late. It's why so few teams, come back from 3-1 down or whatever. And we've been on the other end of that too, but it takes something pretty dramatic to really change the momentum. And that's why when you do have a chance like we did in Game 6, you got to really come out swinging. And, we weathered that storm at 14-2. And then the rest of the first quarter was one of the best stretches of basketball we've played all year. And so taking the lead at the end of the quarter and then carrying that into the second quarter on that great run really set the tone.
What's the Kerr 316 t-shirt that was making the rounds today? Did you see this? Chris Chioza had it on, I think.
Chioza was wearing it. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I know that much.
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
I don't know. You
didn't clank 2 beer cans together at the after party and pour it all over yourself? Nothing like that?
I did not. So I have no idea what the t-shirt means. It made me feel good because it made me look jacked. Because that didn't look like me at all.
What was your level of concern, if any, when Memphis beat you guys by 50 points or whatever it was in Game 5 in Memphis, and they were whoop that trick and Draymond was dancing? You got a home game coming up, but we've seen before, you don't want to mess around with that. As a coach, I'm sure you're like, I'd like just to get the series over with. What the hell just happened here?
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be concerned when you lose by 39 and you trail by 55? I mean, that was probably our biggest test of the playoffs, that Game 6 when we came back home. And
that's interesting.
And I wasn't even there. I had COVID, and so Mike Brown coached and did a fantastic job. But that game was of all the 22 playoff games, I think that was the biggest test. And that's you always have to pass a few of those tests during a run. Another one was being down 2-1 in Boston, that Game 4, obviously. But I was really proud of the way the guys came out and in that Memphis Game 6. And Memphis is tough. They're on the rise. They've done a great job. They got a lot of young talent. Taylor's done a great job coaching that team. So that'll be a fun one, getting together with them next year.
Well, Morant and Draymond are making sure of that on social media, Coach. You made a couple more quotes on, then we're done, I promise. You mentioned being down 2-1 to Boston. I remember, there are no back-to-backs in the finals. There's often multiple days off, not between 3 and 4. But if you froze life after Game 3, it did feel like this is going to be an interesting game coming up because Boston feels bigger, stronger, more physical. Their defense is taking away a lot of what makes Draymond tick, what makes the Warriors' motion offense tick. I wonder what those 48, 24, 36 hours were like for you. Were you confident, like, if we just stick with it, there's a big Steph game coming, like we figured out series before. We've been down 2-1 before, but this is the finals, and this team is imposing in ways that not a lot of teams are. What was your sort of general feeling at that point?
Yeah, we felt very confident because we've been able to come back from 2-1 a couple times before. I also felt like we were chasing our tail in game 3. We fell behind early. I don't think we had a great feel for the matchup yet. I tried to play small in game 3, which really backfired.
It was a strange series that way, where the first 3 or 4 games really felt kind of uneven. Like the feeling out process seemed to take longer than usual for teams at this level.
Yeah, I agree. So game 3, when we fell down, and I thought, man, we got to space the floor and we got to get some shooting out there. We're going to have to find a way to score. And that totally backfired. And so game 4, that's where we kind of switched our mindset to playing bigger and playing Looney and Draymond together more. And Looney went from, I think I played him like 17 minutes in game 3 to, 29 or 30 in game 4. And he was the right guy in the series. I did not handle game 3 very well, but we felt a lot better, in game 4 about the matchups and about the combinations that we had out there.
We're going to end like this. The floor is yours. If there's something you wanted to say about this season, this team, a particular player, a particular person in the organization, a particular story that we haven't gotten to somehow that you really wanted to talk about, I leave it to you. You are the coach of the championship team, so you get to close this out however you like.
Boy, there's a lot of ways I could go. Jordan Poole deserves a lot of love. So does Draymond Green. Draymond's the best defender in the world, and his performance in games 5 and 6 were just ridiculous. But I have to just talk about Andrew Wiggins because his defense against both Luka and Jason Tatum, the last 2 series were just mind-blowing. And when you combine the individual defense with the rebounding, I mean, for 16 boards in game 4, 11 in game 5, and just incredible, suffocating defense. There's no way we win a championship without Wiggs. And to see him grow, the last couple of years, to see a guy who, was maligned and hadn't reached his potential, but to see a guy come in with such a pure heart and embrace coaching, embrace the advice of his elders on the team, and really soak it all in and get better and better, and then seize the moment and play the way he did. It's kind of what coaching, what you want coaching to be all about. You want a guy who's got major talent, who's just going to buy in and embrace everything that's thrown at him. And that's exactly what Wiggs did. And man, what a joy to coach him, and what a pleasure to watch him play.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Andrew Wiggins, Coach, because the idiot host of this podcast somehow did not bring him up for 45 minutes, and he was like a top 4 player in the finals. So thank you for that. Coach, go enjoy it. The draft is in 2 days. You're probably going to have some work to do in the summer and all that, but just an incredible story, an incredible turnaround. You guys stuck with it. You kept your belief. You got healthy, and you're back at the top of the league, and it's really an incredible story. So I congratulate you, and I look forward to seeing you maybe in Las Vegas for Summer League, but get some downtime, and congratulations on everything.
All right. Thanks so much, Zach.
All right, the NBA moves fast. The finals, bye-bye. We'll cherish the memories. On to the NBA draft, which is in 2 days. To help us break everything down, he just posted his latest mock draft. Now a solo act at ESPN after his co-star left us. How dare he, to join the Portland Trail Blazers. The founder of Draft Express, our draft guru, Jonathan Givony. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Zach. How are you?
You miss Mike? Do you feel like a void in your life?
He didn't die, he's still around,
True.
You can still talk to him. He's not as, forthcoming as he once was with his opinions, but I do miss him. I mean, he was like a little brother to me. I loved working with him every single day. He, one of like the hardest workers and like really the best at this job that I've seen. So, he outgrew the nest and he's moved on to bigger and better things. And I think he's only going to move up. So he's phenomenal. I do miss him. I think we'll have some really good options to replace him. It's not going to be the same, but he set a very high bar for us. And I think there's a lot of people around the NBA who are very interested in the platform that his former job offers.
Before we get to Kyrie, and I can't open with this. Before we get to Kyrie, let's talk about the top three in the draft. Let's start there. Let's start at the top three. The big names: Orlando 1, Oklahoma City 2, Houston 3. All along, it has seemed most likely that nobody gets cute here. Nobody tries to trade down and snag an extra asset because they think their guy might be there. The likeliest outcome to me, and you've been in the weeds more than I have, has been Orlando takes Jabari, Oklahoma City takes Chet, Houston takes Banchero. Now, I will say, I don't know how locked in that is. I know that some people within the Banchero camp, for instance, still have some hope that he might go higher than 3. Not because they don't want to go to Houston, just because the higher you go, the more money you get, etc. What is your level of confidence that if I had to bet, I'm still just betting on that 1, 2, 3 in that order. What's your level of confidence at this point?
It's pretty high just because I talk to, almost every team these days on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the first questions I asked, we're like, what are you hearing at the top? And it's always the same: Jabari, Chet, Paolo. So it's, these people's jobs to know these things, especially the teams that are right behind them. And that's how they feel. And that's just a sense I got from very early on, even before the lottery, that was going to be the way that things looked. And, I haven't heard anything to indicate otherwise. I think if Paolo felt like he had a chance to go 1, he wouldn't have pushed back his workout with Orlando again and again and again to the point that he's probably not going to make it in there at this point, So I don't see how Orlando takes him without a workout. And Paolo didn't feel strongly enough that he's in play at 1 to actually get on a plane and go to Orlando. So, Jeff Weltman is saying all the right things, and he's doing a lot of research.
I love yesterday he had comments like, it's still pretty early in the process. I'm like, yo, dude, the draft's in 2 days, man. No one's falling for that. It's not early. January was early. It's not early right now.
I think you have to show that you're leaving no stone unturned. Even when New Orleans got the number 1 pick, and it was such a home run that they were taking Anthony Davis. Dell Demps was still like, no, we're going to do our research and explore it. We knew he's taking Anthony Davis, but they always say this, so
this is misinformation season, and not just in the sense that there's all rumors and buzz and games of telephone. I think there are teams that are calculated enough to make calls to other teams or to people in the media just to put stuff into the atmosphere that they made this particular call for this particular reason, just to get that spreading around a little bit. And the notion of the call, the reason behind the call is actually fake.
Yeah, but that only takes you so far, you do this for 20 years and you figure out pretty quickly who's full of in this business. And because the truth is going to come out in 2 days from now. So, I keep, pretty meticulous notes here. And, I've got my list of guys that these people are not reliable sources of information. And I've got my list of these are people that don't miss year after year.
Me too.
And I stick with the guys that don't miss.
The reasoning I've heard for, all these guys, these 3 guys are all really good. Everyone has different opinions on who's the best, who's whatever. And more and more, a lot of the guys that I really trust are kind of whispering, I think Banchero's being underrated a little bit, as maybe the best all-around guy of these guys. What I keep hearing from people who have talked to Orlando is they view Jabari not just as a great prospect, but as the guy of those three that is most prepared to step in right away and play a major role on a team that I think feels some pressure. I know Jeff Weltman talked yesterday, we don't want to rush back to mediocrity, but I think there is some pressure there to like, we've got to make a big step next year, and Jabari is the guy most prepared to help us do that right away. Is that if you heard similar stuff?
You hear all of the above in terms of this guy has the highest floor and this guy has the lowest ceiling, and it really varies. And I think Paolo offensively is clearly the best player in this draft, and he also plays the most unique role. It just is a guy who's 6'10" and can handle pass and shoot, and you can really legitimately run an offense through him. You can throw him the ball in the low post. He's incredible in the open floor. And he's 19 years old, and he's also shown some flashes of really dynamic shot making ability when he's playing with confidence, and he did it at the biggest stage. I mean, nobody played better than him in the NCAA tournament. When the stakes were highest, he was going up against Texas Tech, the number one defense in the country, destroyed them. And so I think, there's a lot to be said for Paolo. I think he's phenomenal personally. I think all three of these guys are really, really good. So people are always trying to get me to like pit one guy against the other. And I'm like, no, they're all really good. It's just different flavors. And honestly, like all the three of them would be phenomenal together, like in one lineup. And so I think it's a great draft. I think there's really good depth to it, and I think it's a really, really exciting class.
Yeah, I keep hearing this analysis like, well, which one of them could be the number one option on a championship team? I'm like, can we just like hit the brakes for a second? Like, how many guys are there on earth that can be the number one option on a championship team? And we're already talking about whether these teenagers can someday be the number one option on a championship. How about we start with they're really good. They seem like guys you would want on your team that complement other really good players. Let's just be happy with that and move on. If Banchero, by the way, almost no matter who Houston picks, I'm excited to watch the Rockets next year. But if Banchero is there, that Jalen Green, Şengün, Banchero trio is going to be a whole hell of a lot of fun. And I keep hearing questions about, long term, can Houston build a competent defense around Green, Şengün, and Banchero? And I agree you have to start thinking about those kind of questions early. I also am like, I don't know. We'll see what Banchero – I mean, what have you heard about Banchero's defense? Because this is your forte, not mine. I mean, that's the most divisive part of his game. How much can he improve with experience, effort, and all that? Because I think Jalen Green actually – I think kind of developed the rep as a chucker as a rookie. I think he's actually kind of unselfish as a passer and a cutter and has the tools – and I think the will to be a good defender in the NBA. I'm actually optimistic about the non-scoring parts of his game.
When Paolo wants to defend, he can absolutely do it. There's no question about it. The issue is that his energy and his focus really fluctuates, especially off the ball. He can, often be, late to make rotations. This is not unique for a kid who's 19 years old. He's going to be going through this for a few years. Every rookie does. He's definitely not like a great defensive rebounder. There's just some questions about, like how good can you be with a guy with a 7'1" wingspan? Optimally, like he's playing like the 5 with like 4 shooters around him in like a playoff series, right? Like it's hard to see him and Şengün surviving in a playoff series and you actually being competitive. So he's going to probably have to anchor the defense. And, he averaged less than a block per game, so that's just not, the 7'1" wingspan. It's just not ideal, but he brings you so much on the other end of the floor that, and you're drafting third. Like, don't overthink this, Houston. Like, that's the guy.
What's your wingspan, Givony? Have you ever measured your wingspan?
It's negative. I'm like
you're a negative. You're a Redick. You're a JJ Redick.
I'm like Luke Kennard. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm slightly positive. I'd like to measure my wingspan now. I think I'm slightly over my height, which is 5'11" and 3/4. I claim 6 feet. I round up to 6 feet because I will shrink in my old age. So I got to claim 6 feet while I'm within 1/4 of an inch of 6 feet. These guys are super exciting. We're going to talk about where the draft really starts at 4 with Sacramento. But before we do that, we have to talk about Kyrie Irving. Are you ready to talk about Kyrie Irving? Can you stomach this? Are you ready to do this?
I love it. Let's do it.
So this idea that the Nets and Kyrie Irving are suddenly at a, quote, impasse is ridiculous. They've been at an impasse for a long time. I've been writing and saying on this podcast for literally months, why are so few people talking about how we don't know what team Kyrie Irving is going to be on next year? Why is it this like fait accompli that he's going to be on the Nets? And then like the idea that he is frequently unavailable and that would give the Nets qualms about offering him a 4 or 5 year guaranteed contract is like not a new idea. The Nets have been thinking about this internally for months and months and months. So this impasse is not new. Here's where we are. Kyrie Irving has a player option next year for $36 million. He has till June 29th to decide whether to opt in or opt out of that contract. His trade value could not possibly be lower for a player of his caliber at this moment. The Nets have zero interest in selling low on him because they're just not in the business, like any smart NBA team, of trading their guys at the lowest point of their value, unless something crazy happens and a team happens to value Kyrie Irving as if he has played 100% of the games in the last 3 or 4 seasons. The teams that have been mentioned in the Athletic article yesterday as potentially interested in Kyrie Irving: Lakers, Knicks, Clippers. Let's start Clippers. I don't think the Clippers are interested in Kyrie Irving. They could always have a change of heart between now and whenever. I just don't see that organization upending itself for Kyrie Irving. So I'm going to X them for a second. The Lakers and the Knicks have nothing of interest to the Brooklyn Nets, who have to build a championship team now around Kevin Durant, an all-time great player in his early to mid-30s. They don't want Russell Westbrook. They don't want your future first-round picks. They don't want pick some Knicks, whatever. They don't want those guys. There's nothing of interest there. So, then you could say, well, he could opt out and do a sign and trade with somebody. But again, the assets aren't there. And why are the Nets going to help Kyrie Irving and another team get what they want? The nuclear option is opting out. And I can tell you for sure that there is some there is some curiosity both in the Nets and around the league of, is this dude actually going to opt out and sign somewhere for the mid-level exception, whether it's the baby mid-level exception or the big one, which the Lakers need to do some things to actually have access to? That's $10 million. And that's one avenue to get him to the Lakers. We can talk about other teams that would theoretically be Kyrie Irving fits. I still think the likeliest outcome is that this is all a game of high-profile chicken and public negotiating, and that there is some middle ground here that the Nets and Kyrie Irving can land on, whether it's a 2+1. A couple of people have mentioned to me, why not do like a Chris Paul whatever style deal where you give him the 5 years, but in years 3, 4, and 5, there are games played triggers or minutes played triggers to guarantee the full deal. I still think, I just don't know who's paying full freight for him. We can talk about that if you want. I still think that's the likeliest outcome. But again, I mean, literally nothing would surprise me. Kyrie Irving retiring would not even surprise me. Like, that's no reporting. That's just me just saying random stuff. Nothing would surprise me, Givony. What's your read on this?
I would give him the full max for all the years and just figure it out later. I mean, like, how are you going to replace Kyrie Irving? The guy averaged 27 points a game. He shot 42% for three. He's the best ball handler in the NBA.
I'm well versed at replacing Kyrie Irving because I've had to do it for half of every season he's been on my team.
And where did that get you?
One playoff series win in 3 years. That's where it got me. This is the most talked about one playoff series win in 3 years team in the history of sports. I'm tired of it, but we have to talk about it because A, he's a great player. I voted him all NBA 2 seasons ago. And B, Kevin Durant is sitting there like, yo, we had Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Now we have Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons.
Well, you built the team, dude. Who are you complaining to?
Nobody. The world, the basketball gods, the universe. Nobody. I'm just like, we have this guy sitting there, an all-time great player. 3 months ago, Kevin Durant was considered the best player in the NBA. Giannis took that throne from him, but still, that's who we're talking about. Is like, he's the John Travolta looking around in Pulp Fiction meme. Like, yo, James Harden's where? Kyrie Irving is where? What happened? Where Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, the guy that I thought DeAndre Jordan should start over and the coach got fired over it? Where is everybody?
Yeah, so those are, to me, the most likely scenarios. I don't see the Nets doing a sign and trade for the junk that people are offering or they will offer. So it's either, they reach some kind of agreement with him, or, what people are kind of whispering about is, there's this team that's way below the cap right now. And, it's if they don't make a move by draft night, then the cap room just evaporates. And that's Oklahoma City. They're, I don't know, what is it, 24 million under? If you want to ship Evan Fournier and Alec Burks, package the number 11 pick with that, I think Oklahoma City would be receptive to that. They just saw Golden State, spend $400 million in a championship. And Evan Fournier, those aren't bad contracts. Like you could rehab those guys and ship them back out, or you could use them. Yeah, I think that, but like if you're the Knicks, can you do that? Like you need to get a commitment from Kyrie, and like, is he a guy? Is he a commit guy? June 23rd. I'd have a hard time with just giving away the number 11 pick for, essentially a maybe. And so, my prediction is that the Nets just end up re-signing him. They find some kind of agreement, like you laid out, maybe like the Chris Paul thing, but like Kyrie Irving is 30 years old. Like, it's not a bad contract giving him the max. You can get rid of
I can't believe you're saying this. I just can't.
He's so good. At the end of the day, Zach, talent wins in the NBA. And who's more talented? How many players can you name in the NBA that are more talented than Kyrie Irving?
I don't know, 15? Like, what is talent? Is talent cool ball handling moves, or is talent winning basketball games with two-way play? Like, like I said, I voted him All NBA 2 years ago.
He's won some games in his career, Zach.
When he had LeBron next to him, he won some games, and he was massive in those games to his credit. Games 5, 6, and 7 against the Warriors in 2016, he was as good as it gets. I voted him All NBA.
He's a flake, but he's a incredibly talented flake. And there's just not enough great players in the NBA. Somebody's going to want this guy.
Like, at least James Harden plays. Now, he plays very badly in elimination games frequently, including this most recent one, but at least I know he might not be in shape all the time, but at least he plays. Look, I'd
rather have Kyrie Irving on a full max than James Harden moving forward.
I'd rather have food poisoning than either one on a 5-year max going forward. Like, if I'm the GM of the team, I'd rather have a nice, comfortable pillow where I can sleep at night than 5 guaranteed years at $50 million a pop to either one. Let's go to the Knicks, because I agree with you. The Knicks are the most likely team. The Lakers have nothing that Brooklyn wants. The mid-level thing, is he really giving up like $26 million just next year, let alone what's next to do that? Maybe. I don't know. The Knicks thing is the most interesting because they've pursued him before. They're desperate to win. You mentioned them offloading all this money to open up cap space. So really, does it just end up being two guys we don't really want and the 11th pick, which is, a nice pick, but not great. And like, you can talk yourself into it. He's a show. It's the Garden. They almost went to the Knicks the first time. Julius Randle's still there. So you have RJ Barrett would still be there. I think I've heard intel that they would like to, they're leaning toward re-signing Mitchell Robinson, even though that got a little, I think that those negotiations didn't really go anywhere when they could have gone somewhere. That's a decent team. I don't know where you're really going with that team. And I also don't know, like, if your goal is to attract another star, unless we get a year of Kyrie Irving just playing basketball all the time really well, I don't know what other star is going to be like, yeah, I want to hitch my wagon to him because I just saw what happened to Durant hitching his wagon to him, and it went so freaking great that I want to try it. But, I think they're the team. Dallas was always the sort of interesting theoretical fit of like the second ball handler who can shoot around Luka. I kind of think Dallas has moved on. If they were ever even considering it, I think I would bet on them re-signing Brunson, and they just did the Christian Wood trade. They just made the conference finals. I don't see it. Washington would be a really interesting wild card, assuming Beal goes back there. I just don't know what Washington really has to interest Brooklyn. Are they interested in like Porzingis plus KCP plus 2 first? I don't know. I just think that's an interesting one because I don't know what you've heard on Beal. The Beal intel I have is I think Washington seems pretty confident he's going back, and I just don't see any other teams. I agree with you. The Knicks are the one that I would pay most attention to.
Yeah, Beal, it seems, has some type of a handshake with Washington, is my understanding. I'm not reporting that, but that's just what, NBA teams are speculating about. For the Knicks, I just don't think that they have enough time to figure anything else out. Like if Kyrie is the best option they can get, then that's what they're going to do, because the clock is ticking on these dudes, like
the clock is ticking on Tibbs and
Leon Rose. Rose. That whole front office. I mean, like, I've lived here in New York since 2008. I've seen a lot of front offices come and go here, a lot of coaching staffs. Nothing lasts forever in this city. And so, like, they had a very disappointing year last year, and they don't have a lot of avenues to really change their fortunes in a serious way. So is Kyrie like a very flawed option? Yes. But is he the best one that they have? Probably.
Let's make a couple other things clear. I've been told in no uncertain terms Anthony Davis is not getting traded. So just like let's just get that out of the way, let alone for Kyrie. A couple other things. We mentioned Washington and New York. We might as well then bring up Malcolm Brogdon, who I think the scuttlebutt that the Knicks and the Wizards are looking hard at Malcolm Brogdon trades. The Wizards are, what are they, 10th in this draft? The Knicks are 11th. Building trades for Malcolm Brogdon around those picks plus other stuff. I think that scuttlebutt is very real. I don't know which team. I don't think the
Wizards are going to put their pick in, the 10th pick, for a Malcolm Brogdon trade. And I do think the Knicks are looking very hard at putting the number 11 pick in. So that's a much, much better trade offer for Indiana. If you get 11, maybe Obi Toppin, Alec Burks for Brogdon, that's a home run trade for Indiana.
If the Knicks trade 11 and Obi Toppin for Malcolm Brogdon, I'm just going to gawk at Knicks Twitter for like the subsequent 2 hours, because there is going to be an all-time meltdown, because Knicks Twitter, I think with mostly justification, is very, very excited about what Obi Toppin can do if he ever gets real legitimate minutes, as he did toward the end of last season. And Malcolm
what if it's just Kemba and Burks,
well, that's fine. I mean, Malcolm Brogdon is a good player. He can fit with any team. I had heard yesterday that the Clippers, they kicked around Malcolm Brogdon, and that made a lot of sense to me. And then I subsequently heard that they're of course every team kicks around lots of stuff. I don't think Malcolm Brogdon.
Miles Turner also definitely someone that they're going to look at.
And so Brogdon fits anywhere, but he's also injured all the time, and he has, I believe, 3 years at decent money left on his deal. But it seems like he's pretty likely to move, and he's a very good player. I get why. I just it's one of those, how much of your future are you willing to sacrifice for, like maybe another feel-good season where you get the 4, 5, 6 seed and lose in the first round, and like at the end it's like, well, that was fun. What did it get us?
But here's the thing, Zach. There just aren't that many players on the market that you could get this summer that are going to really move the needle for you. And so people are making some real panic moves right now. Like there are going to be some big numbers thrown out on that first day of free agency. They're going to shock some people. And I think there are going to be some real moves on draft night too that, involve some real players. I mean, teams are telling me the draft is our free agency. Yep. There's no cap room out there. There's very few free agents that are actually moving the needle for us. Thursday night is our opportunity to make a splash. And it seems like, I've heard this song before on draft night. I've been old enough to
You're so grizzled now, Givony. I've been around New York since 2008. I've seen a lot of things.
Every year it's like, this is a draft where the NBA is going to explode. And like, it's happened like once or twice.
You need to be smoking a cigarette for this. Like, take a drag. I've seen a lot of things in my time, kid. Let's talk about the draft. But the one thing I'm not interested in doing is relitigating Kevin Durant's personal choices. I keep hearing like he shouldn't have left Oklahoma City. He shouldn't have left the Warriors. Well, like the people who are saying he shouldn't have left the Warriors, there's a large overlap in the Venn diagram between those people and the people who were like saying your Warriors championships don't count because you joined a 73-win team. So like, what is the guy supposed to do? He's just made personal choices. This one hasn't gone great. I also think Kevin Durant doesn't freaking care Yeah, like people think Kevin Durant is quote unquote insecure because of his Twitter behavior. I actually think maybe there's, obviously he hears the criticism. I actually think he's so secure in how freaking good he is that he's like, yeah, this situation goes haywire. Like, we'll figure it out one way or another. I'm cool. Like, I didn't feel fulfilled in Golden State. Didn't feel fulfilled in Oklahoma City or wanted a new adventure. I made some personal choices. Like, I don't like when we get on TV and finger wag. Like, he should have signed with Boston. He should have signed with Washington. He should have stayed with Steph Curry. Like, why can't he just do whatever he wants? And like, if he had stayed with Steph Curry, we'd still be doing this bus driver thing that Barkley is doing about how he wasn't the bus driver. The championships don't count. He just can't win. On to the draft. The draft starts with Sacramento at 4. All sorts of rumors. They want to trade back, trade out, trade that pick for a veteran somehow. One of my favorite pre-draft exercises is finding that team and then building the trade back deals that make sense. And very often nobody ends up trading back. Like, I remember when we did this obsessively with the Warriors at number 2, and they're just like, no, we'll just take Wiseman. That's cool. I don't have a deal that I really love for Sacramento trading back, because the trick is you can't, like, we can talk about the John Collins rumors if you want, and whether 16, which the Hawks have, would be in that trade. The thing about trading back from a place like 4, you can't trade back to like 18 or 12 or 11 unless you're getting a really, really, really good player in return, because the drop-off between 4, which is mocked as Jaden Ivey, and everybody loves Jaden Ivey, and 11 is so huge. What's the latest on Sac?
It feels like if the draft were tonight, like in 2 hours, they're making the pick. That's what I feel like. I don't think that, they've had all these exploratory conversations. They've done all the historicals on, what does the 4th pick net you in a trade, and they've looked around at, especially at options like you said of just kicking back a couple of spots, and still getting a player that they really like. But I don't feel like there's like this incredible enthusiasm for doing that on the part of these other teams. Like if you're Indiana, they're kind of looking at their group and they're like, the guy that you take at 4 could very well be there at 6, like especially with Ben Mathurin kind of, solidifying himself in that top 5 or 6 range. And so, if Keegan Murray is there at 6, I mean, that's a pretty good outcome for them. It's like, why do they need to put Chris Duarte in a trade to move up 2 spots for Jaden Ivey? What does that really do for them? I think they're really looking at this from a long-term perspective. So I don't really know. Like the Atlanta stuff is what you hear most frequently with like Collins, Kevin Huerter, 16. I'm not sure that, like, what does that do for Sacramento? Like John Collins and Domantas Sabonis, can those guys, like, who's guards who? And does anybody guard anybody in that scenario?
Amen. John Collins is the most mentioned trade target in the NBA right now. If you said you have to bet a large sum of money on a player getting traded at draft night, I might pick John Collins over anybody else. But I'm with you. So let's do the deal. Okay, let's talk 4 straight up for John Collins. I mean,
no.
If I'm Atlanta, that's a step back deal because I'm losing a good present day player. But that pick is so valuable. If I'm Sacramento, I'm like, I'm with you. Like John Collins is a good player. He's owed a lot of money. Let me bring up his salary for the next several seasons. He's owed. He's under contract through 25, 26, but at a good number. Like I think it's a good contract, about 25, 26 million a year. But again, Collins, Sabonis, I'm with you. Like it's where it would be a classic Kings move of like, where are we? Here we go. Let's 43 wins. Let's go for it. We got to end the playoff drought. Got a hell or high water. We're going to have 2 home games before we get swept out of the playoffs. Collins and 16. If I'm Atlanta, I start thinking, I got to love the guy at 4. And that may not even, 16 is like not a great pick. That may be not enough for Sacramento. Collins 16 and another asset, it starts getting too complicated. The one you mentioned, 6 in Duarte, that was the one I liked the best as a realistic seeming trade for both teams. Like if I'm Indiana and I love a guy at 4 and I know he's not going to be there at 6, I can live with 6 and Duarte. And if I'm Sacramento, I can sell that as like, that's pretty good return. But you seem to be pessimistic. Like Washington, 10 and who? Like Kyle Kuzma, Rui Hachimura? Like, I'm not psyched about that if I'm the Kings. I'm not going to 10 for that. And
same question marks as Collins. How do you play Kuzma and Sabonis together?
Portland 7 and Josh Hart. I'm not going down 3 spots for Josh Hart. I love Josh Hart. I'm not going down 3 spots for him. But you seem pessimistic on the 6 plus Duarte one, which I kind of liked. And other than that, who do I want if I'm the Kings off of Indiana? I don't want Brogdon. Miles Turner and Domas Sabonis, we just saw that movie. Buddy Hield, I just had on my team. Like, who else do I want? It's got to be Duarte, I think.
Yeah, if I'm the Kings, I'm drafting Jaden Ivey and I'm trading De'Aaron Fox and I'm building slowly, and I'm trying to do this the right way, not take the shortcut, a home run move, which leads me nowhere. And De'Aaron Fox, that's a guy that, what do you think his market is like right now?
Not great. Yeah. I mean, he finished last year really strong. I think the fact that they had to trade Tyrese Halliburton to get Domantas Sabonis tells you something about where De'Aaron Fox's market is. I think De'Aaron Fox is a good player. He just hasn't kind of made the advancements in terms of defense, playmaking. The shot has been up and down over his career. I thought he'd have made a little bit more of a leap by now, particularly the way he finished the 18-19 season before the last one, before the pandemic season. Let's talk about the Spurs, because I played around with number 9 plus something to get up to number 4. Number 9 and Keldon Johnson. I don't know who says no to that one. I don't know who said Keldon Johnson's a good player. Number 9 and Devin Vassell. I think the Spurs might just think Vassell's too good for that deal. I think the Spurs are a under the radar interesting team to watch because obviously they keep their cards close to the vest. I can tell you teams around the league, and you've probably heard this too, are very curious about, obviously there's the Pop factor, right? Like is Pop coming back? And now we assume he is. It's so late in the calendar, but who knows? If this team is game for a deep rebuild, I think there are teams that, if they're not already, are going to start calling about DeJounte Murray. And that's a player with no reporting, no intel other than other teams hoping that he becomes available. That's a player I've got my eye on. What have you heard about the Spurs?
Nothing about Murray. DeAndre Ayton, is a name you hear kind of bandied about, could Phoenix sign and trade him to the Spurs for Podol and the 9th pick, something like that? It's a complicated deal to make because it wouldn't happen for several weeks. But, you hear all this stuff about Ayton's relationship with the coaching staff and all that. Phoenix is going to be an interesting player because they have quietly made inquiries to some of the prospects who are expected to go to the lottery and say, hey, let's set up a FaceTime just in case we can get something done.
Well, you reported today in your latest mock draft, and I want you to expound on that a little bit. Some Pelicans at 8 and Phoenix talk, right?
Yeah, that's one of the places that Phoenix is talking to. And so, Cam Johnson, that's the decision they have to make. Who are we going to pay and how much is it going to cost us? Because Cam Johnson is, I don't know, Zach, what do you think? 18 to 20 million per year, on the high end. And, he's a good player. Is a max or a near max guy. And so, you're this, salary cap is, it's kind of getting out of control if you're, Robert Sarver. And so do they trade Cam Johnson now for a lottery pick and then keep Ayton? They're like looking at all kinds of scenarios I've heard, and that's just one of them. I don't know if anything gets done on draft night, but there is some activity coming out of Phoenix, which is interesting, considering the way that they ended their season and all the question marks they have this summer.
The Ayton thing is fascinating to me because obviously their season ended in incredibly demoralizing fashion. He gets benched. Monty Williams is pretty curt after the game about what happened with DeAndre Ayton, so that's internal. We're like 6 months removed from DeAndre Ayton, boy, we love that kid. He bought into his role. He subsumed his ambitions of being a ball-dominant post player to do what we needed to do. He improved on defense. He's about the right stuff, and he's really matured. And now it's all of a sudden like, do they want him on the team next year? They absolutely cannot afford to lose him for nothing. Like, there's just no way that unless there's something insane happens, that they let a team just offer sheet him and sign him outright. Like, that just can't happen. As soon as he signs an offer sheet, you can't do a sign and trade. So, like, they can't let that happen. So I agree with you. And I think there's an interest on Ayton's side in the sign and trade route opens up the whole league for us. We don't just have to be a cap team prisoner, that those are the only places we can go. I like the Spurs fit for him. I like the Pistons fit for him. And I think the Pistons are thinking about it. They have cap room. They have a hole in the middle. And I would say this. I would bet on DeAndre Ayton. I like DeAndre Ayton. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that he thinks, if he thinks this, that he thinks he can do more stuff on offense than he's been able to show in Phoenix, and he's ready to do it. I don't think they win the Pelicans series when Devin Booker was injured in the middle of it without DeAndre Ayton's one-on-one scoring. He made tough shots. He was a post threat. Like, I think there's a world in which he can shoot 3 or 4 threes a game at a pretty high clip in a pick and pop system with someone like Cade Cunningham. I don't ever want him to be Miles Turner, but I don't have any problem with him becoming like a Jokic level volume 3-point shooter. 3 or 4 a game, mixing some post-ups, some short rolls. Defensively, he's a beast. He's got to get to the line more. But that's a player who I would bet I think I'd pay him the max if I'm a rebuilding team like the Pistons, and I'd be totally okay with it. It's a 25% max. I'd pay him the max. Like, I would bet on DeAndre Ayton. I think he's a good player.
Without hesitation, I'm with you. DeAndre Ayton is 23 years old. The guy averaged 17 and 10. Like, this is not that complicated. And yeah, you didn't pay him last summer. You didn't give him the extension. And yeah, so there were some rocky moments. That's just what happens when you refuse to pay guys. This is the nature of the game. And so if I'm an NBA team, like Detroit or San Antonio, I'm all over DeAndre Ayton if I can get him.
The other team, I mentioned the 25% max. This intel that's been out there, and I've heard the same, that Charlotte is queasy about paying Miles Bridges the max. Okay, that's cool. Like, I get it. You got to play hardball. You got to get the best value. You got to have good contracts, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing then? Are you going to sign? It's one thing if you're going to sign and trade him for like 3 future firsts and a good young player, and you're like, okay, that aligns with our LaMelo Ball timetable. Like, if it's not a complete overpay crazy trade like that, what are you doing getting all snooty about Miles Bridges? Like, I understand he's not going to be a superstar, but he's like a very good player. He averaged 20 points a game. He can do a lot of different things. And at some point, you just like have to build a team. He fits with LaMelo Ball. Like, I don't want to overthink that one. If I'm the Hornets, can I give you just for fun? Can I give you some Spurs trades?
Yeah, let's do it.
The D'Angelo Russell situation has clearly gone sideways in Minnesota. DeJounte Murray is a guy that if I'm a young rising team with a need in the perimeter, I'm targeting him. So would you do, if you're the Wolves, would you do D'Angelo Russell and 2, let's say, top 3 protected first-round picks for DeJounte Murray? Who's extension eligible, by the way. We're going to learn a lot about how much the Spurs really, really want him on their team going forward. Would you do that deal if you're Minnesota?
Absolutely.
I love that fit with Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. That's the team. That's the team for me. Like the Wizards, if I'm the Wizards and Beal's coming back, like that's the guy I'm trying to get. If I'm Cleveland, I know I have Garland. Like, fine, play him off ball or play flip-flop roles. Give me that defense. I think if I'm a rising team in that stratosphere, even the Hawks, like looking for defense around Trae Young, that's a guy that I'm calling them a lot to try and get in the game on that, if they're willing. I don't know if they are or not.
Zach, what about Memphis? What are you hearing there in terms of Brooks, DeAnthony Melton, 21, maybe putting a package there to move into the lottery? Anything on that?
I've heard they're calling around in every direction. They've got a couple of picks in the 20s, do they not? Like 22 and 29 or something. Is that them? I get all my 20s picks confused. I think there's going to be a ton of movement just flipping around the 20s. I have not heard anything imminent with Memphis. Dylan Brooks is extension eligible. He's making 11.4 this coming year, so I guess his extension would start at 120% of that, which Dillon Brooks may value himself more than that. And if so, I think that's where the trade scuttlebutt is coming from with Dillon Brooks. I think it's not sexy. I think the most likely scenario for Memphis is just nothing really big. They've got the Tyus Jones free agency hanging over their head. I've seen them mentioned as a Gobert team. I don't think they're a Gobert team. I don't think when they cash their chips in, and they got a giant pile of chips, I don't think it's Rudy Gobert. Have you heard? By the way, we should probably talk about Rudy Gobert. Have you heard any? The Jazz don't have any picks in this draft, so we have to talk about Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Have you heard? I mean, we know the teams that have been mentioned. Have you heard anything?
Not really. I don't think that Utah is looking to blow up the team. What does that really do for them? What kind of Rudy Gobert is really freaking good, and so yeah, a lot of people would like to have him. And it's obviously a big contract, but I don't really know that that's the direction that Utah is heading in.
I think he's available, but I've heard they're asking a lot, as they should. I just haven't heard. I haven't heard anything close to a serious Rudy Gobert conversation. Toronto's been mentioned. I don't really know that there's anything there right now. I've heard 33. They have the 33rd pick. I've heard that's available. I've heard Toronto is sniffing around at what they can get for that.
I think they'd like to move up if possible. I mean, they like to draft, and they do their work. And yeah, I've been told that all this OG Anunoby stuff is overblown. I mean,
me too.
What player doesn't want to have a bigger role? If you don't like you said with Ayton, if you don't have that ambition to be a bigger and more important player in this league, then are you even a guy that I want on your team? And so I would be shocked if they did something. We'll get to Anunoby
in a second. Let's go through the Gobert teams. Memphis, I don't think is in it. Atlanta, that's the team that made a lot of sense. I just haven't heard anything about it, and maybe Atlanta just thinks Clint Capella's 85% of Rudy Gobert at half the dollars and for fewer years. Why would we do anything to upend it? Brooklyn's got a lot of stuff going on. Charlotte is interesting. Gordon Hayward plus PJ Washington plus some picks. I mean, to me, that's rushing the timetable too much. Putting a 30-year-old center, whatever Gobert is, with LaMelo Ball is why am I sacrificing so much to do that, even if it's just PJ Washington and picks? They also need a coach. Their coach just was yeah, I'm out. I'm good. I'm good here winning championships.
That's not great, yeah.
Chicago is the team that there's been all this reporting on, all this noise, and that's been an obvious fit ever since their season kind of figured out because they have the Vucevic salary plus they can supplement it with they've got a Blazers pick, and their picks are also encumbered, unfortunately. I got no hard reporting on this because there's been no hard reporting to really get on this. My gut just says I don't know what you think about this. My gut just says they don't put Pat Williams in that trade, and if they don't put Pat Williams in that trade, I just don't think there's a Gobert deal for them.
I haven't heard anything there, honestly. I haven't even studied that, but I know Vooch, wants an extension, and they're looking at centers in this draft. You hear them, Walker Kessler, Mark Williams. Those guys are associated with those picks. They have the 18th pick, so maybe there's something there, but I haven't heard anything about it.
I'm glad you brought up Anunoby because there's been all this Anunoby to Portland for 7, right? All this that's been written somewhere, and Portland at 7. I'm fascinated to hear what you know about that. And obviously, there's been Jeremy Grant rumors. There's been trade for a veteran, quick rebuild around Dame rumors. 7 for Anunoby. My immediate reaction to that, which has not changed, is why in the world would the Raptors do that? OG Anunoby is 24 years old. Now, maybe he's so unhappy that the bridge has been burned. I don't hear anything. I'm with you. I've heard the same thing, that's been overblown. OG Anunoby is 24 on a good contract for 2 more seasons. The next 6 years of OG Anunoby's career are indisputably, by magnitudes, more valuable than the number 7 pick in the draft. Go look at what the number 7 pick actually gets you on average. The argument the other way is Toronto, as long as they have Siakam, Van Vliet, and Scotty Barnes was so good so fast, and Precious Achiuwa showed us so much right last season, his first season in Toronto, that you can trade one of your core guys, which Anunoby is, get another bite at the apple in the top 10, maybe make your present-day team not that much worse because of all that support I just mentioned, all those other good players I just mentioned. I mean, Fred VanVleet's an all-star. Pascal Siakam made All-NBA. Scotty Barnes is Rookie of the Year. And we have confidence, the Raptors, in our ability to draft, just nail the 7 pick. We just nailed the 4 pick. We're going to nail the 7 pick too. I'm just like, okay, cool, I get that. If I want to trade OG Anunoby, eventually I can do better than the number 7 pick in the draft. I just never really got why that would be a thing Toronto would do.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, it's really hard to find a guy like OG Anunoby, develop him into what he is, get him on a reasonable contract. I just don't think they're at the stage right now where they're like, let's just take a step backwards, like in draft Keegan Murray or something, like who it's going to take him 2 or 3 years to get to the level that OG is at now. So I don't think that makes a great deal of sense for them. I think that they like their core. They have like 6 guys that they like, and those guys are young, and there's still room for improvement there. And they're going to tinker along the margins, but I think they're gonna go for it next year and see how good they could be.
Your latest mock out today, again on ESPN.com. How many more times will you revise the mock between what mock are we at now and where will we get to by draft day?
I haven't counted, but I'm like constantly tinkering with it on like the back end on my side. So and then we publish it like once a week or so. But yeah, I'm gonna keep updating it every few hours, I think.
Your latest mock has the Blazers taking Sharp, the mystery man from Kentucky, and does not mention much about trades. And obviously, Portland with Lillard, there's been all this trade talk. And they have the same sort of, the issue I mentioned with Sacramento is like, what's the deal? If we're trading back or trading out, who's the guy? What's the trade that makes sense? It's actually not that easy to find. We just dismissed the Anunoby one. Are we heading towards for all this noise, maybe they just take the guy they like?
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, like their front office, Joe Cronin just got a 4-year extension. You have this mandate now to rebuild the team and try and get to the level that you want to get. And yeah, obviously you have this, a clock ticking with Damian Lillard. He's 31 years old. You need to pay him most likely. I mean, how many years do you give him? What do you do with him after that? Those are the question marks, but there's no like quick fix they can make on Thursday night that just like propels them back into the playoffs and makes them like real contenders. So why would they trade that pick? That's what, nobody's like, you see all these rumors out there, like nobody's actually asked that question. Like, how does that make any sense for them long-term? And then, Lillard, it seems like he's very involved there. He's at all their workouts. He's around the team all day. It's not that easy to trade a guy like that. Like he's been there his whole career. I mean, he's an incredible influence on their young players. I don't think that they're, my guess, and I haven't really asked them this question, is they pay Lillard and they, at some point they find an agreement with him, and trade him to a place that he wants to go to, and they get a nice haul in return. That's my prediction. I haven't asked Schmitz that question yet. I probably should, but that's the way I see it going personally.
Yeah, you always have, you hope, the money is going to be absolutely ginormous with Lillard's next deal. You hope you always have the, if necessary, break in case of emergency, Lillard for a bunch of draft picks trade in the bag if things go badly. If you take Sharp and he's unhappy in a year or whatever it is. This is going to sound weird because I just, crapped all over the idea that the number 7 pick is some golden ticket asset. It's an okay asset for a team like the Blazers who, have some interesting young guys now, particularly Anthony Simons. I don't know if I trade that pick straight up for Jeremy Grant. I don't know if I would. Obviously, Dame's wishes are going to be important here too. Jeremy Grant's a good player. He's a good player in his prime. I also have to pay him a lot of money. He's extension eligible, and if I make that trade, there's definitely going to be an understanding that I'm going to give you a max extension that starts in the high 20s and goes for a long time. I bet, again, let's call it informed speculation or whatever you want. I think Detroit would be cool doing Grant for number 7. Maybe they would want another little something extra, like a couple seconds or something. I don't know. I don't know if Portland – I have no intel on whether Portland would actually do that deal. If I were them, I don't think I would.
I don't think that's anywhere close to the value of Jeremy Grant, the 7th pick. I think you're talking closer to like a late first-round pick. You know, I mean, this guy has one more year on his deal. He, people look at his numbers in kind of a hollow way, and he's a good player. He's not a great player, so he's not an all-star. So I just don't see that being anywhere close to what the haul is for them. I think Detroit would like to move Jeremy Grant, but not for the 7th pick. I mean, no way.
You think Detroit would say yes to the 7th pick? You think Portland would?
Oh,
not
absolutely.
Do it? Okay, so we're in agreement. We're in agreement.
Yeah.
You're the intel king of the draft. I'll just tee you up. Like, what team haven't we talked about? What rumblings haven't we talked about? Who do you want to get into that we haven't talked about? The floor is yours.
Oklahoma City. I mean, this is their night. Like they can literally do anything they want. They're now, after the JaMychal Green trade, they're $24 million under the cap, so they could take on like a pretty bad salary from someone and just keep loading up on assets. I mean, they also got some young players that people like a little bit. Kenrich Williams, for example. Lou Dort. Like what do they do with him? Do they? I mean, he's extension eligible. I mean, he's got this team option. They need to figure out what. So Oklahoma, and they have 2, 12, 34, and 14 first rounders from between 2023 and 2027. So
I just like, sometimes when you just say the basic reality of things, it really hits home. 14 first rounders in a 5-year span is just bonkers. Like you literally can't roster all those players. You can't do it. And I
was working on a 2023 mock yesterday that's going to come out right after the day after the draft. And I started, reeling off, like which picks have already been, a lot of picks have been traded already for next year. And like Oklahoma City is involved in like 10 of them, it's unbelievable. They can flip here. They can do that. They've got Detroit. They've got, they can swap with the Clippers. And it just keeps going year after year after year. And so if they want to do something on draft night, they can get it done, And so I think we know that Sam Presti is not afraid to make trades. The question is like, are people going to want to pull the trigger? Like just talking to GMs, decision makers the last few days, here's what they say. So we've been spending the last 2 months talking about the draft, working guys out, watching film, going to the combine, interviewing players, meeting with our doctors, gathering intel reports. At some point, like you're so invested in these guys, you just want to make a pick, even if you're offered something great, it's a very human thing to just want to make a draft pick. And so that's why you don't see that many trades happening on draft night historically. And is this year going to be different? That's what I want to see.
You mentioned Oklahoma City, Denver. Just to review, Oklahoma City acquired JaMychal Green and a future Nuggets pick for the 30th pick in this year's draft, going to Denver now, and 2 second-rounders, I believe, also going to Denver. I thought that was a good trade for Denver, actually. They rarely do you see a salary dump where a team comes out almost equal in draft equity. The details on that pick that Denver sent Oklahoma City, the future Denver first, haven't really been reported. From what I've learned, it's top 5 protected in 2027, 2028, and 2029. And if it somehow has not conveyed in any of those 3 years, which is extremely unlikely, it converts to 2 seconds, I guess, in 2030 when the world will be underwater anyway and none of this actually matters.
That's good value. That's for for the number 30 pick, like in taking on some. So I know that the Nuggets needed to do that, from a luxury tax standpoint or whatever, But, the Nuggets are another team to kind of keep an eye on, like you hear all these rumblings, Bones Highland, is he potentially available?
Why would they do that?
I have no idea, there's a sense that they need to get bigger and tougher in the backcourt. When you talk about, they have the 21st pick, all these guys are being banded about that are like like Dalen Terry, Christian Brown, Wendell Moore, those type, Marjan Beauchamp, like bigger guard wings who can defend multiple positions. It feels like, with Jokic at the 5, they want to shore up, their perimeter defense. And the question mark is, Bones Highland and Monte Morris, can you win a playoff series, and Jamal Murray, obviously, as your backcourt?
That's fair. They did make the conference finals in the bubble. The Bones thing is interesting. I thought he had a really good year. I kind of don't get that one. But if you got a good future first or something, I agree with you, by the way, on the OKC, that Denver pick that OKC got. Giving yourself 3 shots to bet against a team who's really good right now, having a down year in like 5 or 6 years, usually that ends up being a good bet. Usually somewhere along the line you catch them, someone gets hurt, someone leaves in free agency, all of a sudden you're sitting on like the 10th pick in the draft. That's a good general practice. Anyone else we haven't got to yet? I mean, I'm looking at your mock now. We hit the Pelicans.
What about Houston? It doesn't feel like they want to make 3 first-round draft picks. They have 3, they have 17, and they just got 26 from Dallas in the Christian Wood trade. They made 4 first-round picks last year. To do 7 first-rounders in less than a year, that's pretty much unprecedented. And so people feel like that Dallas-Houston trade might still be open, for a third team. If somebody wants to come in there, get a late first-round pick, is Josh Green maybe available on Dallas's side? So that's one that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. And also the Spurs, we talked a little bit about them, but they have 9, 20, 25, and 38. No, very few people expect them to make 4 draft picks.
You have
Thursday.
You have them taking Jalen Durant at 9. This Sohan kid is said to be another player the Spurs are exploring. That's your reporting. I've been told that I'm going to love Jeremy Sohan. But yeah, I agree with you. The Spurs are super interesting for lots of different reasons. I have no idea which direction they're going to go. But yeah, any team with 3 firsts, you saw the OKC model with the Pokuševski deal a few years ago. Package 2 of them to go just target a player you really like. A lot of stuff floating around. It does feel like there's more trade stuff floating around than usual. Your skepticism, though, is on point. There's always a lot of trade stuff floating around, and I think there'll be a lot of trades, but most draft day trades end up being like so-and-so trades 22 and 29 for 23 and 27 or something like that. You know what I mean?
What about the Lakers? Should we talk about them real quick? I mean, they're being active, you're hearing some, they're calling Indiana and saying, how do you feel about Westbrook and Taylor Horton Tucker and our 2026 first rounder? And, they just get a nice, chuckle and say, no, thank you. We've got better deals on the table than that.
Well, they can trade 27 and 29 now, right? So they can trade 2 firsts, I think.
Right.
So you're hearing the Lakers are making calls trying to turn that into theory. I'm guessing if they're calling the Pacers, that's about Brogdon.
Yeah. Which is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can build interesting Russ deals. I mean, the Charlotte one has been speculated about a lot with Hayward going Hayward and somebody going to the Lakers.
I think the Lakers want to get into the second round too. They hit that home run with Austin Reeves. They're talking to a lot of agents about this guy should go undrafted and that guy can go undrafted. We've got roster spots to fill. We need players for next year. We need cheap guys who are ready to play. And so, do they get into the 40s, just buying a second round pick? Do people want to throw Rob Pelinka that kind of bone, by just selling a pick? It doesn't feel like that right now, but you never know. I mean, there's, like we said, there's a lot of teams that have a lot of picks, and, like the Timberwolves have 40, 48, and 50. What do they need 3 second round picks for when they already have 19? So there'll be a lot of movement in the second round too, which is normal. There's half of those picks get flipped. It's impossible to keep track of. Jokic gets drafted during a Taco Bell commercial, so the second round is going to be a wild ride.
I forgot about that. It's perfect that it's Taco Bell. It really, for 5 different reasons, it's perfect that it's Taco Bell. It would not be as funny if it were Ace Hardware or Kia cars or something. It's perfect that it's Taco Bell. Let's end with the Warriors, who are picking at 28. A lot of let me see, who do you have mocked there? The same Wake Forest kid,
Jake LaRavia.
The Warriors have Kevon Looney and Gary Payton II, and then below them, I think a tier Otto Porter in free agency. There's going to be a market for Looney, perhaps a robust one, a market for Payton, perhaps a robust one. We're talking about a payroll that, if you bring back those guys plus luxury tax, is going to be approaching $400 million next year. Are they going to make this pick?
I haven't heard anything different. I mean, like, these are the kind of guys that they need to have on their roster, like cost-controlled, rookie-scale contract, a young contributor. They've got, some really interesting young talent already with, Kuminga and Moody, and I don't know how you feel about Wiseman, but so that's, I assume that they're going to make this pick and just, add to the stockpile of talent. And like, who knows, maybe one day down the road, they need to package all that talent and make another big trade, so it's nice to have good young players to help facilitate those kind of moves.
Jonathan Givony, you are the busiest man at the company right now. Thank you for taking a little bit of a break, really, to come on this podcast and now go back to the phones, go back to the mock draft 24.2.5, and I will see you at Barclays Center on Thursday for the NBA draft, and look forward to reading your 2023, 2024, and 2029 mock drafts coming up soon with a bunch of dudes I never heard of. You're the best in the business. Jonathan Givony, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Great to be with you.